Every day, in this place and every place, I might live and breathe the gospel of Jesus Christ. Amen. As we said, today is week 2 of our 4-week series on stories of Church Renewal. Last week we heard about Reverend Mike Slaughter and his church down in Dayton, Ohio, Ginghamsburg Church. It is a part of the United Methodist Church system, and it has grown greatly with a focus on a mission that gets its members out of the church building and into the world around them. Today we're going to hear a slightly different story, though it still falls within the dominion of the United Methodist Church. It's about a pastor called Lynn Munson Francis. She goes by Lynn Munson most of the time. She is a pastor serving out in California, and she has specialized in church organization and administration. So large portions of today's sermon are taken from articles that have described her work out there, most notably one from the Orange County Register, which is the local newspaper for Orange County where she's done much of her ministry. Lynn Munson Francis is currently, this year, the senior minister at Laguna Beach United Methodist Church in California. She most recently served, before that, as the senior minister for the Yorba Linda United Methodist Church, also in California, for 7 years. That was from 2010 to 2017. She was born in Chicago, and she lived most of her life after she moved in Orange County. She moved to Fullerton, California when she was 9 years old, and she lived in Huntington Beach after she graduated from high school. Pastor Munson has received a BS in psychology from Vanguard University in Costa Mesa, and she received a Master of Divinity at Claremont School of Theology, and she's done, over the last few years, several courses of study to be a ministry coach during her time as a pastor. Quote from Munson reads, "My ministry work has focused on revitalization ministries and new ministries. I have served on the Board of Congregational Development and currently serve on the District Committee on Ordained Ministry in the United Methodist Church." This is in Southern California, of course. She's the mother of 3 children. She says, "I always feel drawn to what God is doing next in God's church and in our world. And I am passionate about Jesus' great commission to make disciples by sharing God's love, God's acceptance, and God's witness of Jesus Christ." Since Lynn Munson's job led her to Yorba Linda in 2010, she's reined in her organization's finances, she has returned it to profit, and she has made key staffing changes and presided over a merger. But as the Orange County Register puts it, but she doesn't work for any company. Munson is the pastor of Yorba Linda United Methodist Church, a church that had been losing money and members for a long time before she arrived. With managerial training and a penchant for business, Munson preaches on the virtues of running religious organizations like businesses. Now, before I continue, raise your hand if this has lost you already, if it's already made you a little bit uncomfortable. Yeah, me too, just so you know. This is not my favorite of the stories we're going to share, all right? Just so you know. So that's a disclaimer. In the process, she has developed a reputation as a financial fixer for troubled churches. "I go into churches that are struggling, and I do my best to turn them around," she said. She was 49 at the time that she arrived at Linda Yorba, so she's now in her mid-50s. "I've always had a flair for doing something new and innovative and difficult. The number of religious organizations in financial turmoil spiked during the financial downturn of 2008 as unemployment rose and giving fell. By hewing to tried and true business principles such as careful expense control and personnel management, some churches, including Lynn's, are finding paths back to spiritual health. There is also a robust industry of specialists who now focus on assisting struggling churches, including, as an example, a church consulting firm called Rayner Research, which is run by Sam Rayner out in California. Sam has cautioned against running religious organizations in a way that prioritizes financial performance over spirituality. That's my sentiment as well. And that's also something that we preached last week, if you recall. Sam Rainer has said that many churches could, however, benefit by adopting a more business-like approach. Is a church a business? No, absolutely not, he said. But there is much to learn from the business world in the area of finance specifically. Not every congregation, though, has had to turn to an outside consultant. For example, church leaders handpicked one of their own in Munson to get Yorba Linda United Methodist Church's house in order. Munson has worked at several different churches that were some of which were facing considerable problems. In less than 3 years at Yorba Linda, she has, this was written this particular article, just a couple of years after she arrived. In less than 3 years, she has boosted income by 64%, opening up funds to renovate the administrative offices and overhaul its affiliated preschool. In the process, she has helped grow the congregation threefold. On a recent Sunday, more than 200 worshipers packed the pews to hear Munson's sermon. Some late arrivers lingered near the doorway while they scanned the room for open seats, a virtually unheard of situation just a few years ago. Ann Test, a retired principal in the Yorba Linda area who's been coming to their church since 1975, has said it's been growing pretty dramatically. It began going downhill about 10 years ago, and then Lynn came and helped us. Munson's affinity for business is something that she got at an early age. When she was in grade school, she would work at her grandmother's employment agency, answering phones and helping out around the office. Munson said she would listen to her grandmother, how she made decisions. She would listen to how she talked to people. And her grandmother was one of her personal heroes in this way. Munson also has learned about the nitty-gritty of running an office by holding management positions at a number of different companies, including various engineering firms. In college, she took management and accounting courses, and she considered majoring in business before she turned to the church. Munson, as we said, got her Master of Divinity at Claremont School of Theology, and she's worked at a lot of churches in Orange County, and she at one point founded a multi-campus ministry for area college students. In 2004, this is several years before she arrived at Yorba Linda, she joined Orange Thorpe United Methodist Church in Fullerton, which had several different congregations going at the time. At that time, members in that church were quarreling over the distribution of funds, and Munson helped to negotiate a compromise. And she believes that compromise opened up church leaders' eyes to new ways forward. In 2010, as we said, she was asked to join Yorba Linda United Methodist. It was grappling with a range of problems at the time, including declining membership and budgetary shortfalls. That year, the church brought in $260,000, which was about $100,000 short of their budgeted expenses. So Munson took swift action when she arrived here. She resolved a number of contentious issues in the congregation, such as the volume of the pre-service music, so not all of them were financial issues. She also consulted with the church's affiliated preschool and pledged to renovate its facilities, which were aging at the time. She says that the moves helped to stem the loss of members and led to an increase in donations. She also reorganized the budget when she arrived with an eye toward cutting expenses. Her members, including those on the finance committee, credit her with doing a fantastic job because she has a good grasp of the business side of things. Her top priority, she has said, was providing a structure for the church's operations, including an administrative hierarchy, clearly defined job duties, and disciplinary guidelines. And she wasn't alone in turning her church around. She quickly gives credit to her staff members. She says, "I helped them to do what they already wanted to do." Part of turning a church around is creating structure. When you've got a clear vision and structure, all the energy goes in the same direction. Shortly after she arrived, she had tackled several of the most pressing issues in the church, but her job still wasn't over. A year before this article was written, 2013 or so, church leaders asked her to help Light of the Canyon United Methodist Church down in Anaheim, which had run into trouble after it lost a tenant that had leased space in its building. As of January 2012, the church had been behind in its mortgage and had been struggling. But Lynn rejected the possibility of an official merger, which would have transferred the debt from one church to the other. What she said was, because we had just become financially healthy again, we didn't want to take on debt that would put us back in the negative. Instead, she arranged to absorb the church's members without officially merging the two churches. Light of the Canyon then passed its debt over to the United Methodist Church, who absorbs the debt of discontinued church buildings. That move further expanded the already growing membership of Yorba Linda. Munson said the official congregation now has more than 300 people. She said that the massive undertaking reinvigorated her. And while she typically moves churches about every 3 years, and here's the funny part, she has no plans to leave at this time. I'll stay forever, she said with a laugh. We're going to keep growing and changing. I envision that we're going to become a new church every 3 to 5 years. So, that last part sounds a little ironic now that Munson is in Laguna Beach instead. I'm guessing the Board of Ordained Ministry in California didn't read her statement in the Orange County Register before they made that decision. Oh well. Well, that's a very different story from the one we heard last week, isn't it? It's almost the complete opposite of what we preached last week. If this story of Church Renewal made you a little uncomfortable, you are not alone. I don't particularly like it either. Of all the stories of renewal we're going to hear during this series, this one's probably the most difficult, because I will always hesitate at the idea of running a church like a business. But the point today is not that we should do all the things that these other churches have done. The point is that church renewal happens in all sorts of different ways and in many different contexts. And it requires us to make specific choices. Last week we suggested that all we need here in Walled Lake is a passionate and faithful commitment to ministry and discipleship that engages us more effectively with the community around us. That applies to all the stories we're going to tell. The point isn't that one church has to absorb another or that anybody has to lose their employment in order for the institution to survive. The point is that churches everywhere have people in them who are thoughtful enough and committed enough to imagine a different future. A future that still serves their spiritual needs and allows their church to thrive once again. Before we can transform the world or work for a better future outside, we have to imagine it right here. Ours is, as we said last week, and we'll remind you every week, probably for at least the next month or so, or two, ours is a ministry of possibility and abundance. And we still have a long way to go. Thanks be to God. And amen.